Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1199 of the Juicebox Podcast. Denver is 48 years old. She's had type 1 diabetes for about 3 years, and we're going to talk about a ton of different things today, but one of the things Denver really wanted to cover in her episode was about being prepared. And we'll tell you a story later about an incident where she needed glucagon, where being prepared very well may have saved her life. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year's supply of vitamin D. Drink AG1.com/juicebox. U.S. residents who have type 1 or are the caregiver of someone with type 1, T1Dexchange.org/juicebox needs you. It needs you to go and complete the survey. It'll take you 10 minutes and you're going to help with type 1 diabetes research. T1Dexchange.org/juicebox. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by US Med. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. US Med is where my daughter gets her diabetes supplies from. And you could too. Use the link or number to get your free benefits check and get started today with US Med. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing together people who are redefining what it means to live with diabetes. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Mark. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 28. He's 47 now. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story. And then at the very end of the episode, you can hear my entire mini interview with Mark. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox and check out the Medtronic Champion hashtag on social media.
Hi, this is Denver. I am a type 1 diabetic that started using insulin about 3 years ago, but I knew over 20 years ago that I had the antibodies for type 1. And so it's kind of been a long, interesting journey for myself along the way.
How old are you, Denver?
I'm 48.
48. 3 years ago when you were 45, but you've known since you were 25 that you had antibodies?
Yes. So totally found out. So 20 years ago, and my doctor will shake his head because he told me never to tell the 20-year-old story again because of the stressful journey it was kind of going through the process. But 20 years ago, I got really, really sick, was losing the ability to kind of digest my food and swallow and things like that. Got pregnant, was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And throughout that process, I saw a nurse practitioner in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her name was Julie Krawcheck, and I'll just throw it out there because I think she was ahead of her times at that point. And just the insulin wasn't working the way that they expected and all that. So she asked to run the antibody test on me. And at that point, they were just starting to talk about LADA. Mm-hmm. And so she ran the antibodies and she let me know that I was positive for GAD. They still treated me like a gestational diabetic. And after I had my child, the numbers got better and everything, but I never really resolved it completely. My A1C was always a little bit higher than you would expect. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of how I started the story and everything. And so we monitored it over time. Eventually, I started feeling better. So we think what happened, kind of looking back, is that I had an autoimmune condition that was undiagnosed, and it was affecting my pancreas as well as other parts of my body. But we never really got the full diagnosis because I got pregnant again. And once I got pregnant with my third child, everything seemed to kind of go into remission and I started getting better.
Denver, I have to stop you for a second because something's happening. It's never happened before while I'm making the podcast.
Oh, no.
I've been holding a laugh in. I've been holding a laugh in since you started to talk.
Oh my gosh, what's that?
And you're not going to know why, but I have to tell you, and it's inappropriate, and you're a woman of a certain age, and you're a lady, and I'm certain I shouldn't be saying this to you, but you said, hold on a second. You said, I lost the ability to swallow, and then I got pregnant.
Oh my God. I guess I just became part of the After Dark series, just God, like that.
No, that's oh my God, I've been holding that laugh in for like 3 minutes. I can't believe that. I know that's not what you meant, but hold on. I'm sweating from laughing. Oh my God. Oh. I thought if I let her keep telling this story, I'm going to implode. My God. Well, there you go. I changed your sad story. There you go. Oh my God. I'm now waving air on my face to try to cool off. Oh, dear Lord. Thank you. Oh, now you're laughing. Now you're really thinking about it. You're like, oh, maybe that is what happened.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep going now. I'm probably going to stumble the rest of the conversation.
I'm pretty sure you can't share it with those 3 kids anymore, but it's fine. Are you still married?
Yeah, we've been married 23 years.
Yeah, I bet you if I got him on here, he'd go, yeah, she stopped before that.
Well, the funny story is he was at the gym this morning and I said, hey, you're at the gym a long time. You need to get home and get ready for work and get out of here. So he comes home and I'm like, you're running behind. You need to leave. And he goes, is somebody coming over? And I'm like, yeah, Scott's coming over. And he paused for a minute. And then he goes, oh, and started cracking up. So, yeah.
Well, he'll enjoy this, I bet. Okay.
Oh, goodness.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize to everybody. I'm 52.
I can't quit laughing now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're still laughing because I'm 52 and I feel like I'm 12 and oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let's get back to the podcast now.
Well, I told you I was worried I was going to be boring. So apparently
no,
we
you
just
started
livened
strong.
it up real quick.
Yeah, no, you started strong.
It's all downhill from here.
Well, that was part of what was in my head. I was like, I'm going to offend at least a handful of, I don't want to say woke people, but and I'm gonna offend at least a handful of people when I say this. But I didn't know how to go on without it. I was choking in the laughter the entire time, and I was starting, like I said, I'm starting to sweat. And this is the shirt I was planning on going to lunch in. So now I sound like a fancy lady.
Well, now you have to change clothes.
Oh, I sound like such a fancy lady now. I'm like, oh, this is the shirt I was going to go to lunch in.
Oh my gosh, that is hysterical.
All right. So anyway. Something about you getting diabetes and then
I don't know that we're ever going to make it past
No, we'll get back to it. I can do it. Don't worry. I've been doing this a long time. I got skills. Well, I'll pull them out right now.
You do have skills.
Oh, thank you.
You do.
Well, so I don't even know where the hell you were going when I stopped you. So you had, let's see. Never mind. I can't go back that far.
I'm putting you on the spot here. I'm going to let you recover. But actually, we're going to jump ahead.
Go
because
ahead.
Now I'm like hot and sweaty and nervous and, embarrassed. Nah, I don't get embarrassed. But my friends will give me a hard time.
You said you were embarrassed, you were nervous when we started, but you're not nervous anymore. I imagine I fixed that. Right now, we're going to hear from a member of the Medtronic Champion community. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes. And this is Mark.
I used injections for about 6 months, and then my endocrinologist in the Navy recommended a pump.
How long had you been in the Navy?
8 years up to that point.
I've interviewed a number of people who have been diagnosed during service, and most of the time they're discharged. What happened to you?
I was medically discharged. 6 months after my diagnosis.
Was it your goal to stay in the Navy for your whole life, your career?
It was. Yeah. In fact, I think a few months before my diagnosis, my wife and I had that discussion about staying in for the long term. And, we'd made the decision despite all the hardships and time away from home. That was what we loved the most.
Was the Navy a lifetime goal of yours?
Lifetime goal. I mean, as my earliest childhood memories were flying, being a fighter pilot.
How did your diagnosis impact your lifelong dream?
It was devastating. Everything I had done in life, everything I'd worked up to that point was just taken away in an instant. I was not prepared for that at all.
What does your support system look like?
Friends, your family, caregivers, for me, the Medtronic Champions community, all those resources that are out there help guide the way, but then help keep abreast on, the new things that are coming down the pike and to give you hope for eventually that we can find a cure.
Stick around at the end of this episode to hear my entire conversation with Mark. And you can hear more stories from Medtronic Champions and share your own story at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you fixed that.
Okay.
Now I'm like, oh gosh, what's going to come out of my mouth next?
You got to stop talking about your mouth, Denver.
Oh my God.
Move
this
on.
is hysterical.
All right. Anyway, sorry. So you jumped. Just go ahead with your story. I'm sorry. Everyone, just try to remember. I can't recap it. If I try to recap it, I'm going to start in the beginning and we're going to get right back here again.
And I can't quit laughing.
Yeah,
So
I know,
I'm really sorry. And I have like a loud laugh. So apologies, everyone.
No, you're fine.
Okay. So that's kind of the backstory. I mean, 20 years ago, I knew I had the antibodies. I was really sick. I got better. That's really kind of the key thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think from that, it's really just about advocating for yourself and kind of pushing for what you know is wrong. Because I knew there was something to the story, about having the GAD antibodies and a positive ANA that, I needed to be aware of. So eventually, jump ahead. I'm watching my A1Cs climb. I'm 115 to 120 pounds and my A1Cs keep going up. I hardly eat. I'm not a big eater for anything, but they were climbing and the doctors are just like, just eat better. And I'm like, how much more calorically do you want me to cut out? I hardly eat. I'm a 2 meal a day eater typically. I'm telling you, there's a problem. And they just kind of poo-pooed it. And then eventually I was having symptoms of diabetes.
Okay.
And this was probably 5 years ago. And I'm really bad with time frames and all that, but I would guess about 5 years ago. And I went to my doctor, who was my OBGYN, except I'm past the kids. So she's the GYN part of that equation now. I let her know, I said, I can't quit urinating. I really think I have diabetes. I have the GAD antibodies, all of that. So they run the A1C and they're like, your A1C is fine. And I said, I don't eat. So I'm sure that I am faking the A1C and that if I'm not eating, I'm lower, but when I eat, it goes high. But because I hardly eat, the average is making my A1C look like it's right.
Right.
No, you're just getting older. How much caffeine are you drinking? I'm like, I have a cup of tea a day. I've done that forever.
Caffeine.
Right. And they're like, well, no, it's just age and caffeine. And they just kind of dismissed me. And living in Albuquerque, the healthcare system there is not good. I felt like I lived in a third world country, to be honest. They're having a really hard time keeping their doctors there. So I would get an appointment with a general physician and they would leave. And before I could get to the appointment, I'd be like, well, I'm still going to have an appointment in a month, right? And they're like, no, we just got a new doctor and they're already 6 months out. So you would just kind of have to wait to get in, but never actually see a doctor. And this is a known issue in New Mexico. And I speak of it freely because maybe the right person will hear it and do something about it. So it really became a problem. And then you kind of jump ahead to 3 years ago. And I had become so sick that I pretty much gave up cooking for the family. My husband began cooking. I worked from home. So I would wake up, go sit in front of my computer. I would work. I would get off work and go lay on the couch and sleep until my husband told me to eat. I would eat and then go up to bed and do it all over again. So I went from being extremely active, walking 5 miles every single day, religiously, hiking mountains and all of that, to not even really getting out of bed or getting off the couch. And knowing that I was really, really sick, but having troubles getting into doctors or getting someone to listen to me.
Yeah.
So it was just really stressful.
I want to tell you that I never heard the caffeine thing before and I laughed at it, but I did some Googling while you're talking and apparently it's true. But it's a type 2 thing. Studies of type 2 coffee drinkers have found that caffeine exaggerates glucose and insulin responses to a carbohydrate challenge and increase average daytime glucose and postprandial responses to meals in the natural environment. So,
right.
Yeah.
And it has that, but she actually meant it as the caffeine was irritating my bladder. And because I was getting older, I was peeing more often because I was being completely dismissed as not a diabetic angle, but like, you're just getting older. So the caffeine makes your bladder more irritable now. So cut it back.
But that's fascinating. So she almost was right about something she was wrong about for the wrong reason. Got it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I wasn't getting off the couch or anything. I was really sick. And I ended up coming down with like this rash all over my body. Head to toe, it was in my scalp. It was everywhere. And so I went to a dermatologist. They tried everything. They tried the creams and, lotions. And then eventually they said, hey, we're going to put you on oral steroids. And I mentioned to them, I said, look, my A1C is climbing. I know that I'm becoming a diabetic and I know that it's going to be type 1 because I have the antibodies. Are you sure this won't push me over the edge? And they're like, no, you'll run higher, but then you'll be fine. But the rash was so bad that I had no choice. Like I needed to take the steroids anyways. Mm-hmm. And so I took the steroids and it didn't get rid of the rash. But what it did do was send my blood sugars to the point that I was extremely symptomatic at that point.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And so they were climbing. The dermatologist could not get rid of the rash. So I ended up going to the allergist that my daughter sees that I also kind of know on a personal basis as well. And asked her, do you have any ideas? They did allergy testing. I was fine. They really couldn't find anything. And I said, I really think I'm diabetic and that the steroid just brought to the forefront where we couldn't ignore it anymore. Will you I know you can't treat me for diabetes, but will you just order me a glucometer so I can see what's going on? Mm-hmm. And she did. And that's when I found my blood sugars were really high. And I went a couple days without eating and they were still climbing. I went to the ER because I didn't want to go into DKA. Like I knew what was coming. And the first hospital that I went to, and I'm not going to use names, but the first hospital that I went to, they left me in the hallway the whole time and never really did anything. They did some blood work, determined that I wasn't in DKA, and told me they were going to discharge me with nothing. And I said, look, I know this is type 1. I have the antibodies. I showed them the labs and everything that I had from a while back. Can you give me insulin? Like, can you treat me? And they said, no, you need to go find an endocrinologist. And I said, I've been trying. I can't get in. And they said to go see the endocrinologist within this hospital system. Well, the funny thing is I made the call to try to get an appointment. They never returned my calls. It kind of jumped ahead real quick. It took them a year to call me back. Oh. Like a year later, I get a call and I said, wow, if I would have waited for this call back, I would have been dead. This is crazy. So kind of jump back to the hospital stay. They're going to discharge me. And I used to work in the medical field. So, I knew what was happening. I knew I had to get ahead of it if I didn't want to end up in a coma. And I felt like if I didn't push that, and this is kind of dramatic, but it's honestly how I felt. I felt like I was going to die. Mm-hmm. And they were going to send me home with nothing. But I knew my pancreatic function was enough based on the numbers I was seeing on the glucometer that if I could just get some metformin or something, that it would kind of perk things up to keep me going until I could get into an endocrinologist.
Okay.
And at first they didn't want to give it to me. And I told the doctor, the resident, I said, look, you are going to write me this prescription. I'm not leaving without it. I'm going to pitch a fit. Mm-hmm. And I said, go get your boss. And they left me sitting there a while longer. And eventually, the head doctor came over and I said, look, this is not okay what you're doing. I need insulin. But if you're not willing to give me insulin or help me get the help I need before I go into DKA, then at least write me for metformin. And if you won't, I swear I will make the biggest stink ever that you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And so she finally agreed that she would write me a prescription for metformin. And I left the hospital with that prescription.
I need to ask you, like, what was their reservation about giving you insulin?
They didn't believe I was type 1.
But you have the antibody test and your A1C is going up and you've got all the signs that you have type 1 diabetes.
Exactly. Yeah, no, they were insistent that I was type 2. The crazy thing is like, because of my medical background and everything, and just the research I had done, and then the things that Julie had told me to be aware of in case I was going to be LADA, down the road, is that if I wouldn't have known to advocate for myself and push, I really believe I would have ended up in DKA or a coma situation, but I just didn't stop. Like, I mean, to be honest, I was kind of nasty by the end of it, but I needed to scare them into giving me what I needed so that bad things didn't happen to me. Like, I was protecting myself and basically reacting any way I had to get that medication I needed.
Well, don't feel bad about that. I'm pretty sure right now in an emergency room in Georgia, there's a story going around about a man from New Jersey who flew all the way to Georgia to yell at them. So don't worry about it. Diabetes comes with a lot of things to remember. So it's nice when someone takes something off of your plate. US Med has done that for us. When it's time for Arden supplies to be refreshed, we get an email. Rolls up and in your inbox says, "Hi, Arden. This is your friendly reorder email from US Med." You open up the email. It's a big button that says, "Click here to reorder," and you're done. Finally, somebody taking away a responsibility instead of adding one. US Med has done that for us. An email arrives, we click on a link, and the next thing you know, your products are at the front door. That simple. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. I never have to wonder if Arden has enough supplies. I click on one link, I open up a box, I put the stuff in the drawer, and we're done. US Med carries everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like the Libre 3 and the Dexcom G7. They accept Medicare nationwide, over 800 private insurers, and all you have to do to get started is call 888-721-1514 or go to my link, usmed.com/juicebox. Using that number or my link helps to support the production of the Juicebox podcast.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm certain that happened about 2 weeks ago. And, I bet they're still talking about it now, about that rude man from the north that came down and yelled at everybody for, not knowing what the hell they were doing. And me not overreacting, by the way, but maybe underreacting. I mean, anyway, at one point.
Well, you're probably like that spiral up, right? You're totally calm and chill, but once you get pushed over that edge, it's like, you better watch out.
No, there's no, how has Arden been putting it? She's like, everybody here pretends to be polite, but they're just regular people. That's something she said about the South recently.
Oh, that's funny.
Whereas here, there's no pretending. Like, we're just going to do the thing that needs to be done or say the thing that needs to be said. Like, we're not worried about some, 100-year-old idea of how you treat each other in society, I guess. The situation was what it was. Like, Arden had a real problem. They were dismissing her, telling her to go away, loading her up on pain meds, and then telling her she was fine after that. And, stuff to that, and not doing the testing they needed to do. And when I arrived, like literally when I flew overnight to get to her, when I arrived that morning at the ER, they were trying to kick her out of the ER, and they were like forcefully trying to kick her out. And
oh my gosh,
one of her roommates was like on the brink of tears when I walked in. Arden was so upset that she was in a tank top and her tears were collected in her clavicle, like in a pool. And I walked in and I was like, "What are you doing to this like kind of burly like nurse?" It seemed like he was running the floor a little bit. I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "They're 19. What are you doing to them?" I was like, "Look at them." I said, "Are you okay with this? You're proud of this?" And I was like, "You didn't run the test yet." And Arden's like, "I told him I wasn't going to leave." And like, so when she thought she was going to get streeted, she demanded to be admitted. It like froze him long enough for me to get off the plane, get on the phone and say, I'm on my way there. I'm going to be there in like 10 minutes. Don't leave, Arden. I was like, you stay there. And do you know, when I got there, he tried to tell me that if I wanted this test run, they had already released her. We would have to literally physically walk out on the street, come back in and go through the process again if I wanted the test run. And that's about when he got New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York all at once.
Good for you.
Yeah. Anyway, they ran that test. So,
okay.
Yeah, we didn't
And
walk.
she's doing good now? Everything's okay?
Yeah, we didn't come up with answers, but we came up with a path to continue looking when she gets home. I hate to say this, when she gets home and back to a reasonable healthcare situation. So we were able to bridge her from there to this.
Yeah.
I was stunned. Like it felt like I was watching a 1970s B movie. Like the way, like he was badgering the girls. And one of the, and the other two girls that were with her, they've never had a medical issue in their life. So one of them had never been in a hospital until that morning. And they had them in there for 12 hours and they weren't helping them and just letting them sit in pain and not coming and talking to them. They're freezing cold. They're not even in a room. They're in a corner of a sectioned off room. While the woman next to her is vomiting her guts out. Nobody's helping her. The woman aside, the craziest thing I saw while I was there, you would think is what happened to Arden. But no, it's a woman who came in with cystic fibrosis for a treatment. So something pre-planned, apparently that they do in the ER that I didn't understand. But they brought her in, sat her down, and the doctor came in and went, cystic fibrosis? And she goes, yeah. And he goes, ugh, tough one. I was like, what the fuck am I looking at right now? Like, what is happening? I don't know what it felt like we let DoorDash drivers become like doctors. I was like, you didn't go to college? Looking for a job? Tired of bringing people their food? Why don't you be a physician in this hospital? Like it was, I was able to dig one decent doctor up. And I hate to say it, but he was older and did not have a Southern accent. He clearly, and I'm not coming down on the South. What I'm trying to say is he moved there to retire and took a job in his waning years. And that's why he was in that hospital. What I was doing is I was talking to a doctor who came from somewhere else. That's what was happening. So forget the South or wherever the hell, like you're out West. Like I don't really care where it is. I think there are pockets in places where the healthcare is just atrocious. And, you know, I may be unaware of that until Arden goes away at school and we get away from diabetes for a second, but still need healthcare. And then I get in there and I learn, oh, it's not endos who don't know what they're talking about. When I hear these stories from people, that's not what it is. It's everyone. So,
right.
Yeah. So good luck.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
So, and you know, it's just, I think the key is you just have to advocate for yourself and keep looking and keep pushing, and you can't stop. Because if you stop, you're giving in, and there are people out there that can help you, but sometimes it's just exhausting trying to get to those people who can help you. And like in my situation, I went back home after the first hospital and I took my metformin like a good patient to, you know, why I'm trying to get endos. And it was amazing. I finally got an endo appointment, got up to the point that I was going to see the endo, and I got a call right before my appointment that said, sorry, we have to cancel your appointment, but she doesn't treat people with diabetes.
The endo doesn't.
Yes. Could you believe that?
How long were you on the books? How long were you on the books for her?
Couple months.
They figured it out.
Couple months.
Yeah. Somebody got around.
They figured it out a couple days before. Yep. That was great. I was still getting sicker. The metformin actually made me feel like I had like lead weights in my legs. So it just made everything worse. And so I ended up, I knew lots of physicians, you know, and I looked at my husband because I started sweating, the racing heartbeat, like just was a little bit of confusion and everything. And so I knew things were starting to shift pretty dramatically again, you know, like it just didn't matter about the metformin. And I said, you need to call our friend at a different hospital system and see if he can do anything, because I'm not able to get into an endocrinologist, and this is getting bad and I'm scared. Like at this point, I'm actually terrified. He makes the call and they say, go straight to the ER and everything. So I go to the ER and there is a doctor there that I see, super sweet, gets me in. He goes, yep, you're diabetic, but you're type 2. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm type 1 here, you know, the same thing, and stuck to the he's like, just keep taking the metformin. Your pH is still fine. And I said, but my sugars are climbing. I haven't eaten in 2 days. Like, this is not good. I mean, if I were to eat, I can't imagine what my numbers would be. They kept me and, for a bit, not admitted, but just kept me in the ER and watched me and gave me fluids, which, of course, it lowered my numbers a bit. And they said, well, just go home, get an endo. You'll be okay. You're type 2, eat better, that whole thing. And I said, and I just kept pushing it. He came back and he said, I can give you some insulin here. And I said, well, if it works, will you give me a prescription? Because that's what I need. And he said, no, it'd be more of an experiment. I'm just curious what happens when I give you insulin. And I just looked at him and said, I'm not going to be your experiment. Let's be done. And so I left, was really upset. I mean, I don't cry. I'm not a crier. I mean, my friends that know me know I'm pretty tough. And I mean, I was just in tears, didn't know what I was going to do, and kind of broke down in a meeting at work. We do a lot of Zoom meetings, and I pop in on a meeting and they're having a conversation and they're like, hey, what kind of wine do you like to drink, Denver? And I'm like, I'd just like to be able to drink wine. Heck, I'd like to be able to get off the couch these days. And it caught everybody off guard.
Yeah.
And they were like, what's going on, Denver? Are you okay? I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm going to die. And I don't exactly remember what I said, but that was the gist of the conversation. That was it. I kind of resigned myself to, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
And the person in the meeting said, no, tell me what's going on. And so I kind of gave her the background on the story. And she goes, your story is exactly like, it was a person that we works with, daughter's story. You need to talk to her. And I was like, I'll talk to anybody at this point, because even as educated as I am and knowing what I know about healthcare, I can't get past this hurdle. And they're going to force me into DKA. And God knows if I'll survive it in this state,
right.
And they're going to force me into this. And it's so stupid when the answer is right there in front of them. So I get connected. I have the conversation. I talk with the coworker's daughter. And she was a geneticist, and her story was exactly like mine. And she said, I have a friend, I have somebody that I know, and I want to get you connected with him. And it was Dr. Pettis, which I share that name just because some people know him. Mm-hmm. And she made the call, and he said, I'll see her. And they gave me an appointment a bit out, and I emailed Dr. Pettis with like a spreadsheet. Literally, I had this spreadsheet that tracked my labs over 20 years, and you could see what was happening and everything. And then I got a call from the nurse that said, hey, come sooner. And I'll never forget, like, I walked in and, it changed me what I had gone through with the ERs and just the frustrations. And he goes, so what kind of diabetic are you? And I said, I don't know. That's why I had to fly to California to get the answer. And he goes, you're type 1, you need insulin. I was like, oh, I know, but I've been fighting. And so I start telling him the story, the 20-year backstory. And he goes, look, you never have to tell that story again. Like, it doesn't matter 20 years ago, you are a diabetic right now.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters. And you're type 1 and you need insulin and you're going to start feeling better right now. And like the relief that I felt, I went back to my, hotel room, and I kind of get a little emotional even right now while I'm talking, but like I just cried because it was like, oh my God, it's not going to kill me. I'm not going to have to go into DKA to feel better. And that was kind of the relief moment at that point.
What's that total time between the first time you thought, I'm peeing a lot, I need insulin, and when you got insulin?
It's probably a year and a half.
Oh, there you go. Everybody should be super proud.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was probably a year and a half of that. But, one of the questions I see like in the Facebook group is, how long ago did you know, or how long did it take you to become a diabetic? And I think like what you can kind of gather from what I'm sharing with you is that we don't know really about the adult onset of type 1. People probably are predisposed to it and have it happening way before they even get the symptoms. So it's almost like an irrelevant question. Yeah. It's just, when do you get sick enough that you need to do something about it?
Right. Yeah, when it's unavoidable. Although you
Right.
got to unavoidable and people were still able to avoid it. So
Yeah. No, it was crazy.
speaking of that, at any point did you feel crazy, or did you never let go of the idea that I'm right?
Oh, I knew I was right.
Okay.
There was never any doubt. And I could actually, it's kind of interesting because I could feel the physiologic changes happening in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell when I hit the point of this is going to get really bad really fast, because I don't have anxiety or anything like that, but like my body was wigging out. Like I would just start sweating. My heart rate would start acting up. I felt confused. I was foggy. I remember when I had my husband make the call, like I was like, I'm starting to get confused. Like I'm pretty quick on my feet and everything. And I'm like, it's just really hard to function and keep up with conversations. Like things were changing really quickly. And I just think it was the metabolic changes in my body.
When you feel it happening and you can't do anything about it, is my wife has pneumonia right now on top of long COVID. And so she was just about, and she just felt like she was coming out of long COVID after like a year. And then somebody got around her who was sick, and Kelly ended up with pneumonia. And,
oh my gosh.
And the other day, she's just like, she's at this point starting to feel better again. But in the beginning days of it, so I was away for the first few days that she was sick. I was in Austin giving a talk, and she sent me a text while I was away, and she goes, I think I have pneumonia. I'm going to the doctor. And she went, and she did, and they, gave her meds, but it didn't hit her hard enough, fast enough. By the time I got home, she's like, I'm cloudy. I'm having trouble thinking, like just that being sick thing, that overall thing, just, it's like a heavy blanket on top of a heavy blanket. It just keeps happening until you kind of can't move and you kind of can't think. And then she was getting, like, you could tell she was desperate at points. Like she was almost like a little girl. Like she'd wake up in the morning and she's like, I don't want to cough anymore. But she didn't mean it like a complaining way. She was kind of like begging the universe, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I imagine you in a similar situation is why I brought it up.
Yeah, no, it sounds very similar. So, well, I hope she starts feeling better soon. It's so hard with the long COVID because they're just trying to guess and figure out how to help people with it.
Yeah, it's all right. We have life insurance on her, so I'll be able to I'll be fine.
You're so bad.
No, I mean, if something happens. I just lost a bunch of weight, so I figured probably wouldn't have any trouble attracting a nice lady, between the money and the skinny. I think I could probably work it out. You know what I mean?
There you go. Yep.
As Arden points out, if that doesn't work out, you're just like chum to ladies with diabetes. Just find one of them. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
That's right. You got lots of fangirls, don't you?
You just imagine on my Tinder profile, I was like, if you have type 1, I can manage your diabetes. And after the conversation I had yesterday, which I won't go into, I genuinely believe there are people who would be like, I don't need love as long as this guy can keep me from getting low at 3 a.m. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
None of you are getting my life insurance money.
No.
I think Kelly's going to be fine, obviously. If I thought Kelly was dying, I wouldn't be joking about it.
I'm pretty sure Kelly's a catch, so you better watch out. She might get rid of you.
Oh, I've been waiting for that for 26 years. At our wedding reception, gosh. I was like, this probably won't last much longer. No, I'm hanging in there. Just tooth and nail. I refuse to go away. That's my that's my secret. I'm just beating the will out of her so that she can't. She's like, oh, it's not worth it. It's like trying. You ever see somebody wrapped up by an anaconda? They're like they struggle for a bit.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, they struggle for a bit. Then they're like, forget it. It's gonna eat me.
Oh my god.
Anyway, that's where Kelly is with our marriage, I think.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank Kelly for, letting her give of your time, because I joke that Dr. Pettis saved my life. But you and Dr. Pettis, through the podcast and conferences and being a physician and things like that, really are the ones that gave me my life back. And I know my story isn't just my story. It's, everybody who follows your Facebook group. I mean, truly figuring out how to manage this disease and live vicariously with it is huge. And I mean, obviously the technology plays a big role in that as well.
Yeah, of course.
I started out with MDI and couldn't get my life back. Yeah, I felt better, but couldn't exercise, couldn't kayak, couldn't hike, couldn't do anything. And so really it was kind of when I switched over to the Omnipod pump, is truly whenever I felt like I was living again.
Good for you. Well, that's excellent. And it's very nice of you to say, and I'm glad you found the doctor that was helpful to you. And, my thanks go out to doctors like that as well. Because obviously not everybody's a problem. It's just when it is a problem and you're in an actual emergent situation, there's no wiggle room for you not to know your job. It's just, it's not okay. Like, if you're a doctor listening to this, look what happened to Denver. Listen to that year and a half that she went through. Like, the description of where she was, that she had to get on an airplane to find a competent person. That's all fascinating, and just shouldn't be. You literally handed them all the clues. You were like, here, it's the candlestick, it's mustard, it's a dining room. Just say it out loud. Say it out loud so we can keep going. And they were like, nah, I don't think it's that. Just unbelievable. Nope. No, really.
And there are so many doctors who are still stuck on if you're diagnosed in your 40s or 50s, it's type 2, even if you're skinny.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just they have a picture in their head. That's pretty much, hey, listen, to be perfectly honest with you, we got them off of, even if you're skinny, at least we got them past the, just look at your body composition and tell you what kind of diabetes you have, because that used to happen too and probably still does. So, I mean, maybe some of them moved a little forward, just not far enough. I don't know. Listen, I'm going to say it again. I'm a guy making a podcast. I figured the whole thing out. I didn't go to medical school. I didn't even go to college. How come you can't figure it out with your undergrad and your grad degree and your, specialty and working in the hospital for all those years? You can't get this straight in your head? Is it that difficult? I'm an idiot. I figured it out. Stop. It's ridiculous. If I'm a doctor, am I not embarrassed to hear a woman on a podcast say, hey, a guy who makes a podcast and his Facebook group are what I owe my good health to? Am I not should I not have my head in a hole if I hear that? See, you got me upset. We started with the laughing. We laughed at the beginning and now I'm upset. We have to move on to something else. All right, here, let's do this. I want to hear a little bit about your management but before that, you say we met in Orlando at Touched by Type 1 recently.
We did.
Okay.
We did. So let's see what maybe I can say that will help you kind of place who I am. So I got there early. You were still setting up when we met.
You're tiny. You're a tiny person, right? Like lean, shorter.
Yeah. Well, bigger than I was, but thanks to insulin. But I'm not short. I'm like 5'6".
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm taller than that.
I think I had lemons on my dress.
Oh, yeah. Wait a second. Deborah, if I find you on the group, will I be able to see you or no?
Yes, there's a picture of me.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's use the internet instead of you describing your dress to me, because although I imagine it's hard to tell because I'm a podcaster, I am straight, so I don't know what people are wearing when they talk to me. Never once looked at a woman's clothing and thought, let me commit this to memory. Oh, I know.
It's a ridiculous dress.
Oh, Denver, I know you. Okay, never mind. We're good. I know exactly who you are. Of course I do. All right.
And then we talked at the end. Mike and I were chatting about looping.
Yes.
So at the last one. Yeah.
By the way, if you would have just said that's who you are, I would have known immediately.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just teasing you. I'm teasing you. Okay, so we met in Orlando and talked a little bit. But before we started recording, you started to kind of tell me a story about myself, and I stopped you. I said, no, tell me during the podcast. So what were you saying? Because I didn't get enough of what you were saying to make sense of it yet.
Well, no, and it's not going to be as big and dramatic as you're imagining, but yeah. So we met, I got there to the conference early and I just came over and introduced myself and we were chatting and everything. But as we're talking, other people were fangirling and excited to see you, as they should be, right? Because of the impact you've had. But
of course,
your brain is constant, even when you're talking to people, I can just see you're thinking and looking and planning and people are sharing their stories and when you see you in person, I can see you taking the pieces of the puzzle and almost putting them together and then watching you speak and talk about how you just instantly see things now because you've been doing it so long. Like you truly have a gift. And it's interesting watching, like I'm a people watcher. And so it's just kind of interesting to watch you and see you. Not that I was stalking you. Wow, that sounds like a stalker. But I mean, obviously we were around each other quite a bit that day. But watching you interact with people and be on stage or just be at your booth and just the way that you watch people and listen to their stories and instantly can throw things out or ideas or pull it all together for people, or just even jump in between, doing the pictures with the kids and the parents and, then jumping back into having that serious, more technical conversation. Like your brain is a special kind of brain. So I know you joke that like you barely made it through high school and you barely had it, but you get it because of the way your brain looks at things. And I think that's what's kind of given you that gift to be able to help people with insulin management.
Denver, I'll tell you a secret. I was very bored by high school. Very, very bored. I was very bored by it. And then even the idea of going to college, it felt limiting to me because I thought if I went to college, I'd have to be a thing because I spent money to learn how to do a thing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, then what if I wanted to shift? I couldn't shift if I was stuck doing this thing, which sounds like, as I'm saying it, I have to say, I don't like it when people in my position say stuff like that. When they say things like, don't go to school, like, go be yourself. Like, that's for them. It's not for everybody. And I'm not saying I'm certainly not saying I'm special, but the way my brain works, it would have been limiting and unpleasant for me to go to college. Like I would have gone, I would have learned a thing. I would not have been good at learning it. I'm very bad at sitting and listening to people, and I don't like to read. There's a thing I was told never to admit. I hate reading. And I really dislike reading. I want to be clear about that. Like, and it's not the process. It's the stopping. I hate the idea of like stopping and sitting and only doing one thing. That's sort of upsetting to me. Like, I like to be able to like, not jump from thing to thing, but I like to be able to like get my fill of something, then move into something else. I don't know. The idea of reading doesn't seem attractive to me. Anyway, I don't like it when like I feel like when like somebody who's like famous for having a six pack and has a podcast and they're like, all you need to do is this and you'll look like me. And I'm like, that's not true. Like that's not true at all.
No.
Yeah. If you do that, this happens to you. Like there are some things that are universal and there are some things that are specific to some people. Anyway, if I was all of you, I'd get an education. Don't listen to me is what I'm saying. And the only reason I'm even able to say it is because it worked out. But I can go back at any different points in my life and tell you how something could have gone different. I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you like this. And then what I would be saying was, oh my God, I should have just gone to college and found a thing to do. Like I screwed up. Like if this one thing doesn't work out for me, this one incredibly unlikely thing doesn't work out for me, I would be bemoaning the bad decision I made in high school and when I was younger. So you shouldn't hear someone say that and just go, oh yeah, that's right, I don't need college. You probably do. I probably did. I just got lucky. That's all.
But you can also be the inspiration for those that college is not the right way for them. And there are other ways to do things and be successful. So, college isn't for everybody. So I think we have to recognize that as well.
Yeah, so. It's worth saying out loud, but it's not worth listening to and like just going, oh yeah, I don't need that. Because what's going to happen is the people who need it are going to hear this and be like, oh yeah, I don't need to go to college. The guy I listened to on the podcast didn't go and he's fine. He makes a podcast because that actually sounds like a thing. I should be embarrassed that I make a podcast. Like it's not a thing you should aspire to because maybe the world's going to continue to shift, but at some point, someone's going to need to do the work. We all just can't be talking about it. Right? Like there's an argument to be made that I should have gone to college and become a doctor and taught people about endocrinology. Like there's an argument to be made for that. It's just this thing worked out and it's all timing. I could have started this podcast 2 years later and it wouldn't have worked. As a matter of fact, I am maybe benefiting from sort of being first. Like there had been a couple of people in the blogging space who tried things in audio, but they weren't podcasts. The technology wasn't there. But once the podcast technology was there, I was just sort of first through the door. I have what business people would call momentum now. Like you can't just steal it from me. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like trying to pull something out of orbit. Like you can't. I'm there now, and there's no room for more, and you can't take my momentum away. It sounds like I'm talking about me, but I'm not. It's a business idea. Like first to market sometimes just wins. And, you know, like, I think that's the position I'm in. And that's dumb luck. Although, if you wanted to get thoughtful about it, I could sit back and tell you that I was blogging and I saw things going to hell while everybody else thought they were okay. And I moved into this spot on purpose to get here first. So, yes, I did it on purpose, but still, somebody else could have done it before me. And I might be the one going, I don't understand. I make a good podcast. I can't catch that guy. Like, why not? You know, so. I don't know, but It was nice that that you saw that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And the reason why it works for you is because of patient storytelling. So, I mean, I don't know, actually, you don't know this, but I worked for almost a decade in patient storytelling, working for a boutique marketing agency that works with the pharma companies. And, you know, that's what we did was patient storytelling. And it's the fact that you build a connection and give an avenue for people to connect with type 1, that's what they need. I mean, humans want to feel connected. They want to be able to share their stories and everything. And you've created that conduit. And then through the podcast, you allow people to, you know, connect with you, connect with each other through the Facebook groups and all of that. And so that is one of the reasons why you're so successful, is the way that, not that you did this to be marketing or anything like that, but it's that whole concept is what you've done without probably realizing in the beginning that's what you were going to be doing. It's almost, you know, it's really kind of the secret sauce that's made you successful, is how you've been able to use your skills at carrying conversations with others and through the podcast that pulls it together and continues to bring in those people. Right. So
it's serendipitous, really. Like, you're right. I didn't set out to do what happened. Like I, you know, maybe a little bit, but I didn't expect everything that happened afterwards. I will still tell you that when money lands in my account that's from the podcast, I still think like, that's crazy. Like really genuinely. I'm like, I can't believe that I sell ads like that. And because somebody who's not involved in it might just hear like, oh, you feel like you're selling something that's about money. It's not. Like, first of all, if the podcast doesn't make money, I can't make it. Like, that's just the beginning and the end of it.
Right.
I mean, I could probably do it as a hobby and give it to you once a week or once a month or something like that. But the time that goes into it it's never ending. Like, that's the first thing. But like, I didn't expect it to be a business. I expected it at one point. I thought I could make enough money that my wife wouldn't mind the time I was putting into it to make it like weekly. That it grew, I think, just shows the need that it was filling, right? Like, there was a genuine need, and it filled that need, and it grew. And still, it's still not growing the way I think it should. And I don't know if that's just me being aggressive or competitive or something like that. But I'm not happy. I'm never happy with the pod. Let me just say this. It took me 7 years to get 5 million downloads, and it's taken me 24 months to get 10 million more. And I still sit around at night wondering why I'm not successful at growing the podcast.
You are your own worst competitor. That's what's going on.
I bugged my wife about it last night while she was being sick. I was like, you know, she's like, oh God, is he going to complain about this again? And I'm not complaining. I'm trying to think it through, because there's an avenue out there. I can't find it, if that makes sense. Like, the avenue I'm on is a great avenue. It's going well, but I know there's a better route, and I can't figure out what it is, but I'm trying to find it. 2 nights ago, it was me texting Isabel from the Facebook group. Like this, I was like, October sucked. I was like, what's going on? Where is everybody? What are they doing? They're abandoning me. Like, I think October went down like 3% from September. But in September, I released the entire Pro Tip series. So it didn't make any sense for October to be greater than September. It just didn't. And yet I still have that feeling of like, and here's where it comes from. And I haven't said it like this in a very long time because I think it's a bit distasteful, but I don't know a better way to explain it to people who are not in my position. I often feel like the scene at the end of Schindler's List, when Oscar Schindler realizes he still has a piece of jewelry on. That's how I genuinely feel. Not to that, please, I'm not comparing the Holocaust with helping people with diabetes, but that feeling right there is like, I know I have this thing and I know how it helps people. I can't believe I'm missing an opportunity to find more people. That's how it feels. So whatever that feeling is, I have that a lot. And for the last couple of years, I've been able to not let it make me feel badly, because the growth was happening like on an insane level. But now I'm like expecting more out of it than just what it's doing, and what it's doing is ridiculous. Like, no lie, I might be in the top 96% of all active podcasts with a niche inside of a niche show. And there is no successful type 2 podcast, which is baffling. And by successful, I mean like huge, like in the market. Right. And type 1s, I mean, such a niche thing. What we're really talking to like less than 2 million Americans, right? So like, there's not like there's a big group of people to like, it's not like I'm making a comedy podcast and everybody wants to laugh. Like, it's not that simple. And still it's doing amazing. And I still think, well, yeah, but I know how many people it reaches. What about all the rest of them? Like, how do I find a way to them? And then when I was speaking in Austin this weekend, someone actually said it to me. Like, what are you doing to reach into communities that don't find the podcast? And I'm like, oh God, is that my responsibility? Like, maybe it is, so the whole thing's just like, there's part of me that just wants to go out like Johnny Appleseed with like thumb drives with all the series on them for managing, and just like walk up to people and give diabetes here. This is for you. I just give them like, here, just go listen to these. You go take this thumb drive, plug it in your computer, listen to these. Your life will be better a month from now. And I know that's not realistic, but I don't know what else to do.
Well, somehow you'll have to get your marketing out to the physicians, and then that way the physicians share.
I don't know. You just spent 45 minutes telling me.
Avenue.
You just spent 45 minutes telling me not to listen to them.
I know, but you can give them a tool that they can share, because
they're not going to listen to me.
I know. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So the reason why you invited me on this podcast is because of my glucagon story. And I just looked at the clock, and you've got to meet your brother shortly.
No.
Do you want me to share?
It's the only thing left on my list. I have Orlando, and I scratched that off, and I have Low story. So yeah, like this is basically a glucagon story inside of an episode. So go ahead. Tell me all about it.
Okay. So just to kind of, before we get into the glucagon story, the one thing that I would tell you is that I'm very independent. I'm very feisty. I live my life by my own terms. My husband will tell you. And so would my friends. So whenever I became diagnosed, it was really hard, because my family kind of started smothering me and got worried. They read online and everything. And during COVID, I had bought a property out in Florida that I was going to build a pool in. And literally, I got really sick right after I put the offer on the house. And I had to make the decision, am I going to buy this house or am I going to back out? And I thought, no, we're going to move forward with it. And so when everybody was kind of panicking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Florida. Like, I need to figure out this disease and managing it, and keep my independence, because everybody wanted to like watch my numbers. And it was like, I would be 120 and drifting down, and, people are calling me panicking. Oh my God, you're dropping. I'm like, I'm fine. So I needed a little bit of a separation, just to kind of figure out the disease and keep my independence, which for a lot of people won't make sense. But I am like very much have to do things on my own terms kind of person. Mm-hmm. And so I knew in order to do that, like, I had to put some safety checks in place. So I let, my husband obviously followed me, but my sister followed me as well. And so my husband, he lost his son at birth in his arms. And so he can get a little upset and nervous and all that. So my sister really was kind of my person that I would call first if something happened. I know that sounds weird, but because of her job, she can answer the phone immediately. My husband's always on planes and stuff and maybe can't answer. Mm-hmm. And so I put together an emergency plan with my sister. And I said, look, with this disease, you just have to be prepared. You don't have to feed the what ifs. You don't have to be scared of it, but you have to understand that when things go wrong, what are you going to do? Because you can't in the moment figure out what you're going to do and be always successful.
Right.
And so I talked through with her and I explained, like, if I ever call you and I say, do the emergency plan, here's what you're going to do. Here's the local number for the police department. Here, I put an electronic lock on the front door. This is the code for the electronic lock. Make sure to tell them. And I just walked her through this pre-created emergency plan, never thinking that we would actually have to enact it or hoping that we wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So I woke up, kind of jumping ahead. I woke up and I had changed my Dexcom the night before. And so got in the shower, and I'm always really stable with my numbers and everything. And when I got out of the shower, I thought, I need to check my sensor and make sure that it's within range, because sometimes my sensors can be a bit off. And I went and I looked at my meter and it said 100, and 30. I don't remember the exact number, but it was the 130s. And I decided to finger stick, and it came back as 54 is what it was, I believe. And I thought, is it really that off, or am I dropping that fast? So I called my sister and I said, look, this is it. This is the real deal. And she panicked and she started asking me questions. Were you sure? Are you this? And I said, Tara, stop. I said, if you want me to survive, enact the plan. Don't ask me questions. I'm hanging up with you now. Do what you're supposed to do. Like, I could tell I was in trouble. I don't have symptoms of being low, so I felt totally fine, but I just knew something wasn't right.
Right.
And then finally the Dexcom read 54, double arrows down. And I checked my blood sugar again, and I was already at 20.
Wow.
And so I grabbed the Baqsimi. And the one thing that my doctor had told me when I started on insulin, he said, look, don't be afraid of glucagon. He's like, if you ever think you need it, just use it. It won't hurt you. But not using it when you think you need it could. And so because I was at this home alone, there was nobody going to find me or anything. I grabbed the Baqsimi and did it. And I had read, on the Facebook group, like, it gives you a terrible headache and this and that. And I thought, well, headache or die. I mean, that's pretty much what's about to happen.
Sure.
And so I remember trying to get it open, struggling with the plastic. I hate the plastic on it, but got it open. And I bent over and I was like, this is going to hurt. 1, 2, 3, go. And I did the Baqsimi. The headache wasn't that bad. I mean, for everybody listening and is like, I worried about the headaches, again, headache or death, make your choice. Not that big a deal. So I did the Baqsimi, and then I just grabbed glucose gel and tabs. Like, I could tell from how fast I was dropping that I was in trouble. And so I started sucking down the gel, sucking down the glucose tabs. I did 50 grams probably of, tabs and gel. And I thought, oh my gosh, the front door's unlocked. When the ambulance arrives, they're going to wait for the fire truck, and the how long it's taking, like, I'll be gone. This isn't good. And so I was like, I have to make it to the front door. And so I made it to the front door and unlocked the door. And then I thought, maybe the neighbors are home, so that way they can talk to the paramedics and tell them I'm not a drug user. Don't assess me for an overdose. Just go ahead and give me the dextrose drip when I go unconscious. Because at this point, I know I'm going to go unconscious, or at least I believe that I am.
You were worried they might give you Narcan when you got there.
Or start looking for the drugs that I use. You see all the horror stories when they find diabetics. And so I made it over to my neighbor's house. And I was 20 at that point, double arrows down. And they had a Ring doorbell, and I pushed it. And it's like 7:30 in the morning. And they didn't come to the door, which I didn't expect. But in the Ring, I say, hey, I need help. And they don't come. And I'm like, I start to, if you can imagine a slideshow, like where you click it forward and it goes black and opens and it's a different picture. So that starts happening. And I'm like, I got to make it back to the house because the paramedics won't
where
find
you
me.
are. Yeah.
The Dexcom is registering low double arrows down at this point, and the finger stick is 20. Actually, the finger stick was already registering 20 before I went to the neighbor's house, actually. But the Dexcom is now low double arrows down. And so I'm like, I have to get back to my yard. So I start walking back to the yard. And every time, like, I feel like I take a step, it goes black. And I'm like, and you're going to have to bleep me probably. But I'm like, fuck you. I'm not dying today. And the lights would come back on and it would happen again and again. I was like, fuck you. I'm not dying today. No. And the lights would come back on. And I literally fought it all the way across my yard. I made it to a chair in the front yard. And I felt like initially that I stayed awake the whole time. But thinking back, I don't know if I did or I didn't, because the next thing I remember is I hear somebody screaming and coming around the corner. And it's my neighbor who's jumped out of a shower. She's got a towel wrapped around her head and she has a Coke and she's like, drink this. And then shortly after that, the paramedics had shown up. I did call the paramedics and I was on the phone with them. So my sister had called them as well. I guess this is part of it. I was on the phone with the paramedics and I can remember the paramedics saying, stay with me, stay with me. And I'm like, I'm fighting it, but it's really hard to stay awake. Like I'm struggling. And they're like, stay with me. Can you hear them? And I'm like, yeah, I hear the sirens, but this is getting really hard. And he's like, you can do it. He's like trying to give me the pep talk. I'm fighting it as well. The ambulance happened to be on a call just a street behind me. So from the time the ambulance was called, they were to me in 6 minutes. So I was still at 20 when the paramedics found me and tested me on their own device as well. So even though I had done the Baqsimi, taken all the glucose and everything, 15 minutes later, I was still at 20. It took 30 minutes, I think it was, to hit 88.
Wow.
So
do you know what happened? Like, did you use a crazy amount of insulin that you didn't cover somehow? Or do you have any idea how you got to that situation?
I do. So what happened is I did my long acting insulin and I was on Toujeo at the time. And this is nothing to do with Toujeo. I just want to throw it out there. Nobody should be scared or worried about their kids because they're using Toujeo. It was a fluke. When I did my injection, I did it in kind of my buttocks, thigh area. And my belief is I hit a capillary. And so that long acting insulin basically turned into rapid acting that hit all at once.
Yeah.
And so the rapid drop was me trying to counteract all of the units of insulin that I had done. It was probably 13 units, right? That, it was counteracting. It hurt the second I did it. My injections never hurt me before, but I did that one. I was like, oh, that hurt. And I instantly had a bruise. So I definitely hit a vessel, albeit small. So it was like that 1 in a million chance. And at first everybody was like, no, you must have mixed up your long acting and fast acting. I was like, no, my fast acting was in another room. I hadn't even left my bedroom for the day. And I said, besides, it takes 30 minutes for insulin to really start working in me. And this was instant.
As soon as it happened, you started getting low. And your sister followed through. She did what she was supposed to do. That's excellent.
She kept it together. She did what she was supposed to do. She called my husband and she said, Bill, don't do what your first reaction is. Don't call Denver, but I'm telling you what's happened. And then, I think after it was all done and, she got the call, the paramedics let her know we're with her. She's awake and all of that. I think at that point, of course she started crying and the relief came over her.
Yeah. I don't know how she wouldn't cry. I'm crying. So, and it's terrible. It was hard.
Yeah. It was hard. I really thought I was going to die, but I wasn't going to give into it. And I fought it. But really what saved my life, I'm feisty, don't get me wrong, but it was the fact I had a plan and I didn't have to think about what am I going to do? I already knew that if I ever was alone and saw a fast drop, that I would use my glucagon, and I think my biggest problem is, when I was at the Touch by Type 1 conference, what makes me angry, I know you have your things that make you angry. What makes me angry is the number of people that I heard who are on insulin, but their doctors won't prescribe glucagon. And I'm like, this should be malpractice. Like, you should not be allowed to prescribe insulin without glucagon because, yes, you're not going to need it more than likely. But the off chance that you need it and you don't have it available, I mean, it's truly the difference between life and death. I mean, even with glucagon, I barely survived it.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine that everyone's not given it as soon as they should be handing it to you with the insulin.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. It just shouldn't be allowed, So, and it was interesting. Like, my neighbor, sent me a text the next day, and she was, she's like, I just don't know how you survived. She's like, I just coded a diabetic that was 19 in the field, and we gave them 2 bags of dextrose, and they went to 300 and they didn't make it. Like, how did you make that? Because it was documented on multiple devices that, what I'm describing is really what happened. And I said, I was just feisty and started the treatment soon enough. Like, if I would have waited for somebody to help me and just didn't keep pushing through and consuming, I consumed over 150 grams of carbs before the paramedics got there.
Yeah, before the few minutes where you kind of couldn't help yourself anymore, but you were still kind of like trudging around trying to find help.
Yeah. No, and I had stuff with me, and it was interesting because even over an hour later, I don't even think I was barely over 100. So, like, my neighbor and I went out to breakfast and I ate pancakes and hash browns. And I mean, I consumed so many carbs because I was just nervous, about what was going on. I, ate too much, but I didn't care. So, but it took a long time to bounce back. And eventually I got really high, but it took a good couple hours before that happened.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. I appreciate you sharing that. I really do. I don't even I want people to not be scared, but I want them to be prepared.
Right.
Maybe, prepared, not scared. And that's really what you should be.
I like that.
Thank you. But you just, like, that's a great story because the situation's unique in that you likely mainlined the insulin, but how quickly you were like, I know what's happening. I know what to do. And you started doing it. Like, that's all really well done. Like, I don't even know another way to say it, Denver. Like, a lot of people would freeze and think, it might be okay. Let me wait. As soon as you saw what was happening, like, you just went into it. And having a plan ahead of time, that's not something I think everybody has. So, although, would someone ask you, why not call the paramedics instead of your sister?
The reason why was because I knew I wasn't going, I felt there was a chance that I wasn't going to be able to stay with it enough to help myself. So she had all the details to be able to give them while they were on the phone. So we would skip some of the steps. Like, she could give them the code to get inside the house. She could tell them she's not a drug user, give her dextrose, via IV. Don't even assess her heart or anything. Just start the dextrose. So she had a plan that I had her write out ahead of time of everything that she was to do. And that's why when she started to get spun up and ask me questions, I'm like, you have it all written down. That's what you have to do. I'm going to die if you don't start doing it.
Do the thing.
And so she switched. Yeah, do it. Just do it, And, she did. And, I think if there's one takeaway from this episode that, I hope somebody would learn from my experiences, don't be scared of the disease. Don't be scared of a low. Be prepared, like you just said, right? Like, take that moment to write down exactly what that plan looks like. And although I wasn't diagnosed as a child and I don't have a child with diabetes, it's kind of the same thing. Like, start training your kids for that independence and teaching them there's always a plan. And even for the caregivers, like, to have the plan that they can share with others of what does it look like in an emergency? Because nobody had to wonder. It was all written out. It was all done. And so in that moment that somebody's brain freezes, if they have that paper or the digital note in their phone, they can go through step by step and do what needs to be done. And for me, I know for a fact that was the difference between life and death.
Wow.
And I also keep glucagon throughout my house because you may have a low and not be able to get to your medicine cabinet or remember that it's in the medicine cabinet if you get confused. So I have a bowl of candy with, glucagon in it in my living room. It's in my kitchen. It's in my bedroom. There's one in my car. There's, throughout my bags. Like I have it on auto refill. So every time I get one, I just throw it in a different place. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the biggest thing is just be prepared.
Good for you. Wow. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I really do. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic episode. You were terrific. How long have you been listening to the podcast?
Couple years. Yeah, I was so mad. I was trying to go through and listen to all the episodes. And on the drive to Orlando, I bumped a button and it erased. So now I don't know which episodes I've listened to and which ones I haven't. So
Deborah,
that was
you drove to see me? Where were you coming from?
I live out on the Gulf Coast. So I'm out by Tampa Bay.
Oh, okay. Not too far.
Yeah. So
yes, I met somebody there who drove like 13 hours and I was apologizing to them when they told me that.
Oh my gosh.
I said, I'm not going to do anything today that is worth driving that far for. I'm so sorry. Like I felt like I wasn't going to, do you know what I mean? Like I felt like I wasn't going to do enough. I was like, that's a big commitment. So, but it was very nice for you to come. All the people who drove over like to see me and come to the event. It was really, really lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, I met some great people there. One of the things I want to do is start like a little group get together, out in the area and stuff, just because, people want to get together and everything. So I was joking. I'm like, we'll have the Juicebox get together and we'll talk about the latest episode. So there's a few of us that swap numbers that we met at the Touch by Type 1 conference. So one of these days I might get around to pulling that together.
Oh my gosh. I can't, please don't put me in charge of that. If you guys want to make local chapters, I think that's terrific, but I can't be involved. It's
oh no, we won't bug you.
No, I'm looking at my to-do list because it actually sounds like a fun idea to me. And I'm like, I can't get involved in that. I don't have enough time for that.
Yeah, and it's cool. And then we met because the other thing we chatted about is after my glucagon story, I just happened to meet the guy that invented that non-invasive continuous glucose monitor. So I'm in the clinical trial for that. So like, I'm excited for the technology that's up and coming. There's so much changing with type 1. It sucks to have the disease, but I think for the longest time, when you look back, it's like things really didn't change. And I think we're kind of in a pivotal point, of technology where things are really starting to pick up and go a different direction.
Honestly, because this will come out later, I feel free saying this here, but unless something goes upside down that I'm not expecting or I can't foresee, there'll be another advertiser for a different CGM this year. So Dexcom's still an advertiser, but there'll be another one and it's a different format too. So
nice.
Yeah. So we'll see if you can just spread the word about all the options that people have as well.
And that's a key options because it's for each person. The technology is so specific on what you're looking for. Yeah. It's not one size fits all for sure.
No, 1,000,000%. You should do what works for you for certain. Okay. Well, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you very much for doing this. It was lovely. I really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me on and thank you to your wife for, all the time you're allowed to give to us. Cause I know that you help a lot of people, with the show that you've created. So thank you to both you and Kelly.
Oh, I'm sure she's thrilled to not have to spend that time with me. So she'll take the thank you still, I would imagine. But I think if she heard that, she'd think, yeah, it's good. You guys can have him once in a while.
Well, you have, that's funny.
I have a lot
of energy. Wonderful lunch with your brother.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, Denver, that thing you described earlier about me, like, assessing and thinking and all that stuff constantly, like, try to imagine day to day. That might get a little exhausting if you were around me constantly because I don't stop doing it. Like, I'll tell you the fastest story. I was leaving Costco the other day and you know how they check your receipt on the way out the door to make sure you're not stealing anything or they're making sure the register people didn't miss anything. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, okay. I do.
So there's 2 lines down either side of the exit. And I'm standing there in line and I noticed nobody really like absorbing the world around them. So I'm absorbing them. I'm like looking at what everybody's doing. I'm watching the checking people. I'm watching the people standing in line. I'm seeing the whole thing. This little adorable elderly Japanese couple come up and they just blow right down the center. So there's a line on the left, a line on the right in this space, and they go right down the center as if the world and its rules do not apply to them. And they just walk out of the Costco. And
Oh my God.
it was funny. Like, I'm pretty certain they weren't stealing a ribeye, but they're on their way out. And what I noticed was that no one else noticed. And so I really started assessing everyone's faces. I don't just mean the people checking the receipts. I mean the people in line, the people. No, it happened unbeknownst to everyone but me. I had a full assessment of what had happened, and I tried to talk to the checker about it. And the guy goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." I was like, "That couple just walked out in front of you." He goes, I didn't see that. I was like, "Oh, wow. You all don't see the world the way I do." I was like, "That's interesting." Like, so, I mean, there were 40 people there. No one but me saw it. And then I started thinking, like, am I the crazy one? Maybe I should just be like shutting off while I'm standing in line at the Costco. Like, do you know what I mean? But I'm not. I'm busy going like, what's that person doing? I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder what their story is. Like, I don't know. I think that might make me, like, what makes me a little better at talking to people is that I am genuinely interested in what's happening. So.
No,
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
So you
Anyway.
can tell, you carry great conversations with everybody. So
You're very nice.
But
thank you.
Yeah. Well, you have a good one, and I appreciate the time. And I hope everybody, well, we probably, or I, not you, either offended half the people or made half the people laugh. So, you know.
Oh, the ones that are still here, you're all my people. Everyone who's still here. I love you so much. Like, that you stayed through like a long conversation, heard something sad, and got through the part in the beginning where Denver said about the pregnancy. I think that I think you and I would all get along very well. So I agree. All right, hold on one second. Arden has been getting her diabetes supplies from US Med for 3 years. You can as well. usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. My thanks to US Med for sponsoring this episode and for being longtime sponsors of the Juicebox Podcast. There are links in the show notes and links at juiceboxpodcast.com to US Med and all of the sponsors. Mark is an incredible example of what so many experience living with diabetes. You show up for yourself and others every day, never letting diabetes define you. And that is what the Medtronic Champion community is all about. Each of us is strong, and together we're even stronger. To hear more stories from the Medtronic Champion community or to share your own story, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox. Don't forget, we still have Mark's conversation at the very end. It's a terrific kind of mini episode, about 10 minutes long, that goes deeper into some of the things that you heard Mark talking about earlier in the show. If you're looking for community around type 1 diabetes, check out the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. But everybody is welcome. Type 1, Type 2, gestational, loved ones, it doesn't matter to me. If you're impacted by diabetes and you're looking for support, comfort, or community, check out Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. And now my full conversation with Medtronic Champion, Mark. Mark, how old were you when you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
I was 28.
28. How old are you now?
47.
47. So just about 20 years?
Yeah, 19 years.
What was your management style when you were diagnosed?
I used injections for about 6 months, and then my endocrinologist in the Navy recommended a pump.
How long had you been in the Navy?
Let's see, 8 years up to that point.
8 years.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a number of people who have been diagnosed during service, and most of the time they're discharged. What happened to you?
I was medically discharged. Yeah, 6 months after my diagnosis.
I don't understand the whole system. Is that like honorable?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, if you get a medical discharge, you get a commensurate honorable discharge. I guess there could be cases where something other than that, but that's really how it happens. So it's an honorable discharge but because of medical reasons.
And that still gives you access to the VA for the rest of your life, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Do you use the VA for your management?
I used to up until a few years ago when we moved to North Carolina. It just became untenable.
Mm-hmm.
Just the rigmarole and process to kind of get all the things I needed, for diabetes management. It was far easier just to go through a private practice.
Was it your goal to stay in the Navy for your whole life, your career?
It was. Yeah. In fact, I think a few months before my diagnosis, my wife and I had that discussion about, staying in for the long term. And, we'd made the decision despite all the hardships and time away from home. That was what we loved the most. So that's what made it that much more difficult.
Was the Navy a lifetime goal of yours or something you came to as an adult?
Lifetime goal. I mean, as my earliest childhood memories were flying, being a fighter pilot, and specifically being flying on and off aircraft carriers. So, watching Top Gun in the 80s certainly was a catalyst for that.
You've taken off and landed a jet on an aircraft carrier?
Hundreds of times.
Is there anything in life as exhilarating as that?
No, but there's a roller coaster I rode at, I think it was at Cedar Rapids up in Cleveland, Sandusky. And they've got this roller coaster that takes you from 0 to, I think it's like 80 or something. You go up a big hill and you come right back down. So the acceleration is pretty similar, I would say, to a catapult shot.
I'm going to guess you own a Tesla.
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I'm a boring guy. I got a hybrid RAV4. I get made fun of. I get called, my wife says I drive like a grandpa. I'm a 5 miles per hour over the speed limit person. No more than that. So yeah, in the car, I'm boring, Scott.
So you've never felt a need to try to replace that with something else?
You can't replace it. It's irreplaceable.
That's what I thought.
So up until the point where someone, buys me an F-18 or allows me to get inside a 2-seater and fly it, you can't replace it.
How did it make you feel when you saw, or maybe you haven't seen, a gentleman named Pietro has his large aircraft license. He's flying for a major carrier now. He has type 1 diabetes. Does that feel hopeful to you?
Yeah, it does. When I was diagnosed, that wasn't a possibility. The FAA prohibited commercial pilots who had type 1 diabetes. But I think it was 2017 when they changed their rules to allow type 1 diabetics to be commercial pilots. And part of the reason they did that was because of the technology advancements, specifically in pump therapy and pump management. So I don't have any aspirations of going to the commercial airlines, but one of my sons who has type 1 diabetes very much wants to be a commercial pilot. So, in that respect, I'm very hopeful and thankful.
Yeah. Do you fly privately now for pleasure?
I do. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do is fly my kids to the different soccer tournaments I have all over the Southeast U.S. So last week, my wife and I and 2 of our boys flew up to Richmond for their soccer tournaments up there. And Charlie, who's my middle child, has type 1 diabetes. So, if I can combine flying, family, and football in one weekend, to me, I think I've just achieved Valhalla.
So then it sounds to me like this diagnosis was a significant course correction for you. Can you tell me how it affected your dream?
Well, I guess 3 words come to mind. First, it was devastating. Everything I had done in life, everything I'd worked up to that point was just taken away in an instant. And I was not prepared for that at all. The second emotion was it was scary. I hadn't thought much about life outside the Navy, certainly not life as anything else but a fighter pilot. And Heather and I were getting ready to move to France. I was going to do an exchange tour with the French Naval Air Force. So we were taking French classes. So pretty quickly, I had to reinvent myself. And then probably the most important thing at the same time that all that was going on, I had to learn how to deal with type 1 diabetes and how to manage it effectively. The third thing that pops into my mind, I guess, is challenging. New daily routines I had to establish, first with injections and then eventually, through pump management. And then learning how to count carbs and recognize highs and lows, how my body reacts to blood sugar trends based on exercise and stress and those types of things. And my goal at that time, and it still is today, is to leverage technology and make sure my habit patterns are effective so that I take diabetes management from the forefront to the background.
Have you had success with that? Do you feel like you've made the transition well?
I have. I believe in continuous improvement, so there's always more to do. I will say the technology since I was diagnosed, specifically with pump management, it's just incredible. It takes less of me intervening, and it's really done by the pump itself and by the algorithms through the CGMs. And to me, again, that should be the goal for everybody, is to not have to focus so much on the daily aspects of type 1 diabetes management. We should let technology do that for us.
What else have you found valuable? I've spoken to thousands of people with type 1 diabetes. The one thing that took me by surprise, because I don't have type 1 myself and my daughter was very young when she was diagnosed, I didn't really understand until I launched this podcast, and then it grew into this kind of big Facebook presence. I heard people say, I don't know anybody else who has type 1 diabetes. I wish I knew more people. But until I saw them come together, I didn't recognize how important it was.
Yeah, I think similarly, I didn't know anyone with type 1 diabetes growing up as an adult up until when I was diagnosed. And then all of a sudden, people just came out of the woodwork. And when CGMs first hit the market, certainly within the last 5 years, it's amazing to me and my family how many people we've noticed with type 1 diabetes simply because you can see the CGM on their arm. I would say a month does not go by where we don't run into someone at a restaurant or an amusement park or a sporting event or somewhere where we see somebody else with type 1 diabetes. And the other surprising aspect of that is just how quickly you make friends. And I'll give an example. We were at a soccer tournament up in Raleigh this past Saturday and Sunday, and the referee came over to my son Charlie at the end of the game and said, "Hey, I noticed you were wearing a pump." And he lifted up his shirt and showed his pump as well and said, "I've had type 1 diabetes since I was 9 years old. I played soccer in college. I'm sure that's your aspiration. And I just want to tell you, don't let type 1 diabetes ever stop you from achieving your dreams of what you want to do." And this gentleman was probably in his late 50s or 60s. So just having that connection and seeing the outreach and people's willingness to share their experiences, it just means the world to us and just makes us feel like we're part of a strong community.
Yeah. So would you say that the most important things are strong technology, tools, understanding how to manage yourself, and a connection to others?
Yeah, technology for sure, and knowing how to leverage it. And then the community, and that community is your friends, your family, caregivers, for me, the Medtronic Champions community, all those resources that are out there to, help guide the way, but then help you keep abreast on, the new things that are coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And to give you hope for eventually, that we can find a cure.
You mentioned that your son wanted to be a pilot. He also has type 1 diabetes. How old was he when he was diagnosed?
So Henry was diagnosed when he was 12 years old. It was just at the start of COVID. We were actually visiting my in-laws in Tennessee. We woke up in the morning and he had wet his bed. And several years before that, we had all 4 of our boys tested for TrialNet. So, predictor of whether or not they're going to develop type 1 diabetes. And Henry and one of his brothers tested positive for a lot of the indicators. So we always kind of had an inclination that there was a high degree of possibility he would develop it, but we always had it in the back of our mind as well. And so when that event happened at the beginning of COVID, we had him take his blood sugar on my glucometer, and it was over 400. And so right away, we knew that without even being diagnosed properly by an endocrinologist, that he was a type 1 diabetic. So we hurried home to get him properly diagnosed in Charlottesville. And then we just started the process, first grieving, but then acceptance and, his eventual becoming part of the team that nobody wants to join.
How old is he now?
Yeah, he's 15 years old now.
When's the first time he came to you and said, "Is this going to stop me from flying?"
Almost immediately. So like me, he always had aspirations of flying. In fact, he, out of all 4 boys, wanted to be in the military. And that was a difficult part of the conversation and maybe something that we don't talk about as a community. But there are some things you cannot do as a type 1 diabetic. And that's a hard fact of life. And unfortunately, joining the military is one of those hard and fast things. You cannot join the military as a type 1 diabetic. So that was very difficult for him and for me and my wife to get over. Then we also started talking about being a commercial pilot. And so I saw that same excitement in his eyes because like me, he can be in an F-18 or a 737 or a Cirrus SR-20 that I fly and be just as happy. Yeah. So he still has that passion today and still very much plans to eventually become a commercial pilot.
I appreciate you sharing that with me. Thank you. Do you have 4 children? Do any others have type 1?
They do. My oldest twin, Henry, has type 1 diabetes, and my middle son, Charlie, has type 1 diabetes as well.
The boys are twins?
The oldest 2 are twins. One has type 1 diabetes. My middle son, who is not a twin, has type 1 diabetes.
I see. Is there any other autoimmune in your family?
There isn't. I'm really the only person in my family or my wife's family that we know of with any sort of autoimmune disease, certainly type 1 diabetes. So unfortunately, I was the first to strike it rich and unfortunately pass it along to 2 of my sons.
But celiac, thyroid, anything like that?
Nothing. We're really a pretty healthy family. So this came out of nowhere for myself and for my 2 sons.
That's really something. I appreciate your time very much, and I appreciate you sharing this with me. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Scott.
Learn more about the Medtronic Champion community at medtronicdiabetes.com/juicebox or by searching the hashtag Medtronic Champion on your favorite social media platform. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com.